Hello everyone, Loremaster of Sotek here, back with the last episode of the Wood Elf prediction series. I apologize that this is basically releasing in the dead of night, but it's been kind of a crazy day. Things have been a little busy around here, and I've got a ton of stuff coming out all over the place, and I can't afford to release this video tomorrow because all the speedrun stuff is releasing tomorrow, so this video has to come out tonight. And I finally had some time to sit down and record it, but you know what, I think honestly this video is perfect for a super late night episode because all of us are going to have to take out our conspiracy hats and put them on. This is the tinfoil hat episode for the Wood Elves. Basically everything that I'm putting on here is stuff that would be kind of cool, but is probably unlikely. There's only one thing in this episode that I look at and go, I could see it, but the rest of these are so out there, weird things that I'm gonna tell you about them because there's a chance, but I'm not gonna go beyond that. So here we go. First is today's Legendary Lord. As you know, each one of these episodes has a dedicated Legendary Lord. And the one that I want to talk about today is the extremely powerful Wood Elf Spellweaver known as Naieth the Prophetess. So, Naieth is basically this really powerful... She wasn't originally, but in more modern lore, she was updated to be this extremely powerful elven wizard who is one of the more prominent members of Wood Elf society. She's a big deal. And it's because there is no Wood Elf who has the gift of foresight like Naieth. Obviously, she's called the Prophetess, so as you can guess, she's a prophet. And she's very skilled and gifted at seeing the future and essentially reacting to it, or allowing the Wood Elves to get ahead of certain concerns. So how would I like to see her implemented? Well, first of all, she's a very powerful wizard, and her entire gimmick revolves around the idea of seeing the future, which that is flat out the focus of the Lore of Heavens. The Lore of Heavens is all about future foresight, in addition to weather and astrological events and all that kind of stuff. So I would see Naieth the Prophetess basically being a extremely powerful legendary lord who has the Lore of Heavens as her big, sorry for that noise, for her big gimmick, or her main focus. So on top of being a powerful caster who would have the Lore of Heavens as her big focus, she comes with one really famous magic item. And the magic item that Naieth is best known for, way back in her 4th edition days, I cannot recall the name of it, but what I do remember, it was called an earthing rod. It was a something earthing rod, but basically she used these these branches that were just saturated with magic. And basically what she would do with it is she would lift them up and slam them into the ground, which would cause the magic within the staff to basically pour out through the earth across the battlefield, allowing all of the other Wood Elf wizards to have a much larger reserve to work with. So I could see her, or was it a dowsing rod? It was something, I don't remember. But the way I would do it is I would have her arcane item basically be a staff that I think the way you could do it to make it kind of interesting and different would be that she forces all of her abilities and spells and stuff to go on cooldown for maybe 15-30 seconds. I'd probably say 15 seconds is fair. And maybe she's even rooted in place for a little bit, 5 to 15 seconds. But she like massively recharges the power pool. But I, for balance reasons, would have her only able to do it once per battle. So essentially, you would want to save her until really late in the battle. Well, as late as you feel comfortable, allowing your very squishy wizard to be running around. And then when your winds of magic get low and you're like, oh, I'm desperate to get some more magic so I can cast some other big spells and stuff, you would activate her staff, and she would become rooted in place and basically slam down her staff, and everything would go on cooldown for her. But she just causes the your Winds of Magic pool to get a huge boost. Now, what exactly they would have to do for the values, they'd have to figure that out, because I don't think you'd want it to the extent where you would save her to where you have like a red symbol, like you're literally getting no Winds of Magic, and then you activate her and you go back up to 30. That might be a little silly. But, you know, it would be great to see her be able to allow you to essentially go from being no magic to close to full, or at least having your reserve refilled, so that suddenly you have a second wind with a magic heavy build. You know, I kind of see Naieth as being a character that would encourage you to take more spells than you normally would. Either taking a lot more spells on Naieth, or maybe even taking multiple wizards, because she would give you enough Winds of Magic to actually mess around with that. So I could see that being her big focused gimmick. Beyond that, I imagine she would work fairly similar to most spell weavers. So she would probably have really powerful magic attacks in close combat, probably decent weapon strength, but you know, her melee attack and melee defense would leave a lot to be desired. Blessing of the Ancient, so she could restore the Winds of Magic in Forest. Arcane Conduit. I would say for her, I could see her having a type of a build. There's not a lot to her. She was a very basic character back in 4th edition. And then when her character became much, much more important, especially in 8th edition, in 8th edition, Naieth went from being like a character that existed but wasn't crazy important to like one of the most important Wood Elf characters. In 8th edition, I would really like to see her essentially have an ability called essentially like the Foresight of the Forest, or something to do with like the Eyes of Athel Loren, something that alludes to her ability as a prophet. And what I could essentially see it doing is allow her to have a buff that she can throw on a unit that gives them increased melee attack and melee defense, as she like lends her gift of foresight to this unit, so they're able to see their enemies' incoming attacks, so they're able to easily dodge. You know, it synthesizes the idea of them easily being able to dodge them and strike back at their opponents who are caught off guard by their enemy knowing the moves they're going to make. I think that would be really, really thematic and interesting. But like I said earlier, I would give her the Winds of Heavens as her spells. Maybe we could even see some of the really old Lore of Heaven spells referred to, like the Second Sign of a Mule, or maybe she could have as a bound spell one of the Heaven spells that we have not seen in a really, really long time. Ice Shard Blizzard, which was a debuff you would cast on someone and it would lower their chance to hit and their leadership, which could be really fun. So she like calls down a hail of shards that doesn't do damage, but it's a debuff where it causes like ice hail to hit that unit, and like their accuracy, their melee attack and their leadership drops for a bit. That could be really, really fun and interesting, and kind of a thematic pull there. When it comes to stuff like mounts, being a spell weaver, I would expect her to. You could either take her on foot, take her on an elven steed, a unicorn, or a great eagle, and that, you know, would be all pretty straightforward and stuff. You could give her additional magic items. I don't know what. Like, I guess you could just kind of pull some random items out of the stories of the Wood Elves or from their magic list if any of those things aren't used in game, but she doesn't have like a massive roster of magical items. But Naieth would be a cool character. I wouldn't mind seeing her at some point to give us just like a casting focused lord who, that's her only gimmick, is that it's like, oh, she's a wizard. A powerful wizard, but a wizard. You know, she's not Durthu. She's not supposed to be in there fighting in the thick of it. She's not, you know, a shooting character. Like, I guess, you know, she would probably have a bow, just because all Wood Elves tend to have bows, so I wouldn't be against the idea of her having a bow that she could shoot, but it's, you know, maybe she doesn't have a ton of accuracy and the missile damage is really low, but it's just something so she can be doing some passive damage from a distance. That would be kind of cute, I guess. But, yeah. That pretty much does it for Naieth the Prophetess. Like I said, she's not the most involved character, and there's not nearly as much to her as there is all the other characters we've talked about, because obviously all of those guys are actually like really, really core to the Wood Elves or were playable in 8th edition, whereas Naieth is important to the Wood Elves, and she shows up in a lot of stories, but she fights a lot too, surprisingly. Like, Naieth gets her hands dirty with magic, fighting demons in the Dreaming Wood, or fighting alongside Erloth when he went to confront Morgar. You know, she gets stuff done, but she's also not the most... She's not your first pick, I guess I would say, but I would like to see her at some point. She might make like a cool free LC character one day, maybe. But that's it for her. So let's get on to a new character proposal. Now, okay, hear me out. This is one of those ones where you're gonna need to put on your conspiracy hat, your tinfoil hat, because these guys are super weird, and I am really stretching on this one, and I admit that. Like, this is purely a, here's an idea, which is the Council of Beasts. So, for those unaware, there is a set of entities in Athel Loren known as the Council of Beasts. And these guys are an extremely powerful and almost divine group of spirits that live within Athel Loren. But where you have all the tree spirits or the forest spirits who represent like the actual trees and like the flora of Athel Loren, the Council of Beasts represent the fauna. So they're the animals. So like there's, I want to say there's like a beast of hawks, there's a beast of bears, there's a beast of owls. Like their forms are very strange. It depends on which version of them you're looking at. There are some that have them as like elf animal hybrids, where not like elf animal hybrids, but like they have like the head and the features of like a wolf, but they're bipedal, so they're buff and they have 2 arms and 2 legs, and stand on 2 legs. Or you could have the other version, which is just the really big versions of whatever it is they're representing. So like the Spirit of Wolves would be just a big wolf. Personally, I like the first idea a little more because it's a little more crazy looking, but I could, in a theoretical timeline, see these guys being a Lord or hero type character. In that I could see, they'd probably be lords, but I could see them as heroes. But it could be really interesting to essentially have a large primordial spirit that essentially represents the animals of Athel Loren. You know, something that stands for that part of the nature that lives within the forest. So like, and it'd be really, really cool if they had like a randomized animal when you recruited one. So like you recruit a Lord or Hero Council of Beasts, and depending on their trait, maybe they look different. So like if you get the council member of wolves, he's got wolf features, so he's got like a wolf head and fangs and claws. If you get the council member of raptors or hawks, whatever you want to call it, you know, he has a bird head with like a really sharp beak, and he's got like razor talons and all this stuff, and lots of feathers. Could be a really interesting idea. Actually, I think the best way I could see these guys implemented would be if they were on the tech tree. So like, imagine if you have the tech tree as it already is, but maybe in that center area you could put the Council of Beasts. And when you unlock each member of the council, instead of just being like followers or like a generic tech buff, like they would give you those tech buffs. So like if you choose the I can't remember what the animals are on the Council of Beasts, but I'm pretty sure there's at least a hawk and a wolf. But if you were to choose like the council or the Spirit of Hawks, then you would get him as like a hero that could join your army, and he's this big scary spirit, but he also provides like a speed bonus to all units faction wide, something like that. You know, as like, you know, he turns the wind in your favor or whatever. Like I said, I'll flat out admit it's a crackpot theory. It's super weird, but I could see it being really cool. Where you just have like these big scary dudes who are all kind of a little different looking, but based around the same generic idea of animalistic monsters. And, generally I imagine they'd be like really good for dealing with large groups of units because they'd be big and scary. They'd have magical attacks because they're spirits, really high physical resistance, not ethereal, so not like 75% physical resistance but no armor. I'd imagine them more like forest spirits, but better, so maybe like 25% magic or physical resistance, but they have a little bit of armor, or decent armor, like in the 50s or something. But their whole thing should be just about like smashing apart large groups of units. Essentially, I don't know if they would be full-on monster size, but maybe like on the smaller end of monster size. Like I said, it's a weird idea, but it's just something I thought of that I thought was worth talking about because they're kind of interesting. Next up, we're going to be moving into the more grounded part of the world again with new unit ideas. And the last two units we're going to be talking about for the potential of the Wood Elves are Spites to start with. So Spites, or Sprites, or Spirits, as they have many names, or fairies, are these, typically, they tend to be smaller creatures that kind of hang out around the bodies of other large spirits within Athelloren. So like they live inside and around tree men, or they flit around dryads and all this stuff. However, you can expand the definition to essentially just mean the spirits of Athelloren that do not take forest form, and there are many types. There are many types of Spites. Some are very small, some are not so small. And I think a really interesting unit idea would actually be calling upon the much more sinister Spites. And when I say sinister Spites, I think we could actually turn to the Wildwood. So there's a place in Athelloren at the very, very southern border known as the Wildwood. And the Wildwood is basically a jail. It's a prison. And the purpose of the Wildwood is for all of the spirits who are too dangerous or too sinister or too wild to be allowed to roam Athelloren and, God forbid, leave Athelloren. They're all in prison there. So the spirits that have tried to kill elves, the spirits that have tried to conquer all of Athelloren, the spirits that have tried to assassinate Orion and Ariel, the spirits who kidnap and devour children, or worse, like, they exist. After all, Warhammer Fantasy is a dark setting. It's not a happy place a lot of the time. And there are many spirits imprisoned within the Wildwood, such as Coadil, who's the big scary bad of the three ancients that ruled over Athelloren. Coadil having gone mad after he got coated in the blood of Morgur, and granted, he was always a little bit not kosher with the elves, but that literally drove him to madness. And Durthu being the other one who's still alive, and Adenhu being the third of the trio, but he died a while ago. But anyway, I would think it'd be really cool to see the spirits of the Wildwood, or Spites, not Sprites, be represented as a unit. So I think there are two ways you could do it. Either one, I think this would actually work really well in the Wood Elf roster, but I'm kind of thinking like harpies. So you would have like this unit of flying spirits, which Spites can take an infinite amount of forms, but a lot of the time because they have aspects, right? It's because they're spirits. They don't have like a set true form typically. It's more like they have like a elemental aspect, a war aspect, a peace. I guess you wouldn't call it a peace aspect, but how threatening they appear and how deadly they are depends a lot on their mood. But when they were to go to war, Spites can be exceedingly dangerous creatures. They can be extremely venomous. They can be very, very spiky and make like armor out of natural things like bone, animal flesh, fur, wood, bark, which is the same thing. But like there's a lot they can do there. So what I could really see is maybe like a flying unit that's like a harpy unit, but they're all these magical, bizarre looking spirits, these Spites, or they could be dark Spites, who are like controllable creatures that the Wood Elves have released from the Wildwood to recruit to their armies, because while they're deadly, it's still possible to contain and keep an eye on them. But You know, maybe they could be like these horrifying things that have like the frenzy rule, and they're flying, and they have magical attacks because they're spirits. So they have good, or they're spites, so they're forest spirits essentially. So they have decent physical resistance, probably very little armor, but they could be all about having like decent, like pretty respectable melee attack and weapon strength. Probably little to no armor piercing, and then you could give them poison on top of that with frenzy and let them just go to town, so that they'd be perfect for tearing apart like enemy ranged units, war machine crews, which would be a big thing because wood elves generally really struggle against enemies that can take like a lot of war machines, like dwarves. So it could be cool to have something that you could kind of like fly around the edges that's very cheap to recruit, and they're able to just like dive bomb in on war machine crews and just rip them apart in a frenzy of teeth and claws and stuff. So I could see that being super duper cool. You could do another version of making them like infantry, but I feel, and like making them more like man-sized or goblin-sized, but I feel if you were gonna do that, I feel like it'd be really hard for them not to essentially like take the, like, just be worse dryads. So I feel like that'd be kind of boring. So no, I'm gonna change my mind. I think they should stick to just being like a flying unit, and they could even maybe have some like chill shooting attacks. Like maybe they have the ability to unleash even smaller spites as part of their attack to attack people, because there's many types of spites that were recorded in 6th edition. So like there are spites called netlings, mischiefs, terrors, radiance, despairers, malevolence, shrikes, and luminescence. Like they were all these crazy little different kinds of little spirits that you could attach onto a forest spirit or a character that would follow them around and give them different abilities. So maybe like you could base them off of various versions. So like they could have maybe like a attack where they're able to essentially summon like a smaller group of themselves. So maybe they could have an active ability called a befuddlement of mischiefs, where they're able to like unleash a little swarm of biting and gnashing little spirits that swarm around and cause a bad time and like do debuffs to an enemy in addition to a lot of damage. Or you could have a Regiment of Renown version that has a passive called a Blight of Terrors, which allows them to cause terror. Or maybe you could have them, like, you could just have all sorts of illusions to these various abilities. You know, you could have the Muster of Malevolence, which could allow them to like have maybe like a super short range attack where they're literally like throwing things at you that are poison attacks, but they have very little ammo. Something, you know, just a bunch of little ideas there. But yeah, maybe that's super crazy, but thought it was interesting and worth bringing up. I find spites to be a really fascinating part of Wood Elf culture, and I would really love to see them represented somehow in the roster. So maybe if we had like the larger spites as like a harpy, like a goblin-sized harpy unit, and then they could like use the tiniest spites as weapons, or augments to themselves, and you would like see them flying around their heads or whatever. Just an idea. And the last thing we're going to talk about for new units is one that I actually think is pretty likely to see in the game, if we're lucky, because I know a lot of the multiplayer community has been asking for it, and because I committed to putting 2 units per video, these guys just kind of ended up in this one, which are the Glade Knights. So what are Glade Knights? Well, they're not as impressive as they sound. They are literally just Glade Riders who are melee focused. Like a Glade Knight would just be Glade Riders, but instead of having fancy bows, they have spears and shields. That's it. Like they would literally just be a cheaper fast cav unit. So, you know, they would just give the Wood Elves access to something that isn't Wild Riders. You know, even when we talked about Great Stag Knights in the 2nd episode, that would be a much larger and more expensive unit than Wild Riders. And I think Wood Elf players really want a cheaper cav unit, and Glade Knights would be perfect to fulfill that. And hell, I mean, if they have Azrai Spears, they would technically deal armor-piercing damage, but honestly, I feel like that would be unnecessary. They could just... Well, I guess if they had AP-focused damage, but they just kind of low damage, it would be fair. But, you know, they could be with or without bows. Doesn't really matter. I think. Just if you want to save costs, you would take them without bows, or if they were going to be added to the game, if you wanted them to be cheaper and just use them as melee cav, then it would be better for them not to have bows. But if you want them to be true to their tabletop variant, they probably should have bows, because Wood Elves very rarely don't have bows, if they already had bows to begin with, in the case of something like Glade Knights. But that's going to wrap up the unit portion. So let's talk about the last mechanic, and then we're done with this. So the last mechanic I want to talk about that I would really want to see for the Wood Elves, and this one is not just a simple proposition, but something I really want, is a diplomacy mechanic. So one of my biggest drums that I am constantly beating on as hard as I can is that I feel very strongly that every single race in Total War Warhammer should have a confederation mechanic. There should be a system that you are intended to go through that can result in straightforward confederation with other members of your race. For instance, if you're playing the Empire, you use the Imperial Authority whole thing that they introduced in the Empire Free LC. If you're playing Greenskins, you crump the boss of the other warband or other tribes. If you're playing Norska, you slay the boss of the other tribe. If you're playing Bretonia, you research tech upgrades to, do all the research you got to do to get their confederation. And I think, High Elves, you do it through their manipulating diplomacy system, their influence system. There we go. So I really want every single race to have something that they're supposed to focus on. And the Wood Elves don't have one right now. The Wood Elves, they don't even get the ability to confederate until they upgrade the Oak of Ages enough, but I'm pretty sure they're going to get rid of that because that mechanic sucks. I imagine the Oak of Ages will hopefully be toned down a bit with how, many mechanics are locked behind upgrading it. So how do I think the Wood Elves should work for confederation? Well, I think it should be tied to the concept of the hunt, or the wild hunt. But maybe not directly the wild hunt. Here's my proposition. I think for a confederation mechanic, your faction should basically get a set of missions of something they have to hunt down to earn the confederation of another faction. But I think there should be a couple of restrictions. One, I think it should wait until you have a minimum of 50 diplomacy with said faction, like 50 positive diplomacy. So once you reach a positive of, or maybe it should be 100. Let's say 100. So once you reach a net positive of 100 diplomacy with another faction, so they're very friendly towards you, another Wood Elf faction, that should unlock a mission from that faction, where basically they say, hey, there's this monster, there's this faction, there's this beastman herd that has been just terrorizing us and pissing us off. Go kill them, and if you do that for us, we will confederate with you. Once you settle this horrid abomination that's been constantly harassing us and tearing apart our forest and all this stuff, we will offer you a confederation, and you can either accept and immediately confederate with them, or you can decline and just get a massive diplomacy buff with them, plus 200 or something. And for as what the mission should be, I would say it should depend. So for Laralorn Forest, I would have it be a storyline that has to do with the Skaven or the Greenskins. So they could be oh hey, here is a quest location. So you go to that quest location and you fight a quest battle of fighting a bunch of Greenskins. Or it could be something simple like destroy go to the Black Pit and raise the Black Pit regardless of who owns it, burn down the Black Pit. Or it could be something like wipe out this tribe, wipe out this Greenskin tribe that we really hate. If you're dealing with the other Wood Elves, maybe it's hey, you want to take us over? Once you accept this quest, and 20 stacks of beastmen spawn and you have to kill them, or else they're gonna blow up all your shit, but you get confederation for it. I just want there to be something. And the best thing I can think for Athel Loren is to go after things that are threatening each of their particular forest domains. To me, that makes the most sense for them. The only other thing I can think of would be like really dependent on specific things. Like I kind of thought about maybe doing something like a mechanic involving the wildwood, like maybe trying to conquer the spirit. I just don't like where that idea went. I would really like to see something done with the wildwood, like not have it just be a place that's mentioned, but a place that you actually have to interact with or can have an interaction with, where you have all like the really scary evil spirits of Athel Loren. But I just can't think of a good way. I'm so sorry about that. I just can't think of a good way to make it work. So I don't know. But in any event, that is going to do it for this video. I apologize that this one's notably shorter than the others, but this one kind of had like what was left for the ideas. And I would love to hear how stupid you think all these ideas are in the comment section below. But in any event, I hope you all have a wonderful night. I feel bad for anyone that gets woken up by the notification of me putting up this video. But like I said, I have to put up speedrun shit tomorrow because I've got others. Like, there's so much to do, guys. There's so much to do. But I love you all very, very much. I hope you're all staying safe and taking care of yourselves and hanging in there. But at the very least, hopefully we'll hear some more stuff about the Wood Elf versus, well, Wood Elves versus hopefully Skaven. Could be Dark Elves, but I'm pretty sure it's Skaven. But hopefully we'll hear something about the Lord Pack pretty soon. I was not expecting the Three Kingdoms DLC to come out as fast as it is. Like, they literally announced that thing and announced the release date. Like, they literally were showing off footage like 5 milliseconds after the trailer, which is insane. So I really feel like they're trying to just kind of get Three Kingdoms out the door so that maybe they can bring out the Amazons for Troy, or maybe the Lord Pack. Maybe the Amazons will be after the Lord Pack. We'll have to see. But I've really got my eyes on Gamescom, I'll tell you that. But in any event, I do want to give a quick shout out to all of my patrons over on Patreon. Thank you guys very much for all your support. I greatly appreciate it. I could not do this without y'all's help. I could not do it. I literally mean that in every facet of the ability, that I would not be able to do all the research I have to do for these videos. I wouldn't be able to look up the books I need. I wouldn't be able to buy the books I need. I couldn't do the stuff I got to do if it weren't for y'all's support on there. Even those of you that are only able to do like $1 a month, that helps out more than I can express. So thank you so much. And with that, also a big shout out to the Big Six. Thank you guys very, very much for your very generous support. I don't know how you do it because it's kind of crazy. The amount of support y'all give to me on a monthly basis is just whack. So thank you to Sign of the Emperor, Higgins the Seagull, Eric, Wendell Short Eyes, Jeffrey Ramers, and Charles Bode. And with that, have a great night, guys. I'll see you next time. Bye.